In the name of Allah, the most beneficent, the merciful. Dear students, Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to our course Applied Linguistics. And in our today's lecture, we discuss about some language teaching approaches and methods. What are those approaches and methods that are being used by the teachers in the classroom? So we will discuss. First of all, we will see what is called an approach and what is the difference between approach and a method. So here, as you can see, assumptions about nature of language learning and teaching. Assumption we mean that we assume what we can say prediction about something, or not prediction, but we can say set of rules, set of beliefs, set of concepts that needs to be implemented, that needs to be what we can say employed to reach a final destination. If we are dealing with the teaching and learning field, or in this field of what is our destination. Our destination to make our learners to be able to read, write, and the improvement of the 4 language skills. So these are our destinations, or these are our aims. So we want to get these aims by applying different strategies, techniques, or methods. And approach provides us. It provides us about the set of rules or set of beliefs or these sorts of things, that how we can meet our aims and objectives, how we can achieve our destination. So it's an overall theory we can also discuss about under the heading this approach. Whereas method, overall plan, practicality is involved, not just theoretical as in approach we have discussed. It's a theoretical overall theory. But here overall plan, we are dealing with what we can say pragmatically, or what we can say practicality here is involved for systematic presentation of language based on a selected approach. We have selected approach, and how can we achieve that destination by applying that approach. Approach gave us a set of rules and a set of beliefs or concepts, and method is a way. By walking on that way, we can achieve our destination. So it's related to practicality, whereas approach is related to theoretical knowledge or theoretical concepts of theoretical baseline or foundations about particular phenomena. An approach is a way of dealing with something or somebody. It deals with general philosophy of teaching, explain why we teach in that way, and a set of principles, beliefs, or ideas. That is called approach. A method is the process used or the steps taken to deal with an issue or a person, or we are dealing with a problem, or problem related to a person, a problem related to students, teacher, or any other issue related to the language, or any other issue related to different phenomena. So it deals with more practical nuts and bolts. They are the way we teach, right? So in approach, we see that the explanation or justification, or what we can say in a broader sense, are timelines, or what we can say not timelines. We can understand that the main features of our plan, or main features, or in the what we can say the theoretical form. Whereas method, it deals nuts and bolts. What will be the used, what sort of strategies, what sort of techniques will be used by the teacher to complete that process of learning or teaching. So this is the basic difference between approach and method. In general, an approach is viewed as an overall theory about learning language, which then lends itself to approaching language learning in a certain manner. We are going towards our destination. We are in the way. We are in the direction to achieve our destination. can also see a comparison is given in this slide, approach versus method. Approach is the way in which something is approached, or something is achieved, or something is going to be achieved. Or method is the way in which something is done. As I have told you earlier, approach is related to theoretical basis and method is related to practical basis. Approach refers to the direction or angle or dimension. Method refers to a process, the actual process that is based on practicality. Approach refers to the theoretical framework in general, or methods refers to step-by-step guidelines. Approach has to be decided before selecting the method, whereas method can be selected after deciding the approach. So we cannot say that we have applied this method and what will be our approach. Firstly, we need to decide about our approach, what sort of approach we are using, whether here is an involved the what we can say deductive approach or inductive approach, or what we can say teacher-centered approach or learner-centered approach or learning-centered approach we are applying, then we will decide what sort of our strategies, our techniques we will use in this way to achieve our destination, to achieve our aims and objectives and goals. So here you can see the examples. What are those examples? Teacher-centered approach, as we are very familiar with this teacher-centered approach in our school, in our government schools, but we see the overall trend is going on, is prevailing overall trend of about teacher-centered. About teacher is the dominant figure in the classroom, or teacher controlling all the class or all the students or learners, and has authority, all sort of authorities he has, and the students are also teacher. In what way a teacher likes he or she will behave with their teachers, or he or she is performing all of the academic duties. He is delivering a lecture, he is doing whatever is done by the teacher, and active role of the students is missing in this teacher-centered approach. Whereas in learner-centered approach, learners are active in this approach. Teacher is facilitator, and he or she is playing the role of scaffolding, as we have discussed scaffolding under the theories of sociocultural theory, ZPD, zone of proximal development. So teacher is playing the role as assistant, as what we can as a facilitator, and the learners are playing their active role regarding their learning process. Then subject matter center or learner center, or what we can say, there is another approach, learning center. Firstly, there was the teacher center approach that was very famous in the previous century. Then after that, the era of learner center. But now what we can say, another term has been introduced by the linguist, the learning centered approach. Although we cannot see in this box here, but you must know that the new terms, new paradigm about this approach, there is a learning center. There must be learning at any cost, whether by applying the teacher-centered approach or learner-centered approach. There must be learning, some sort of learning by the learner. So subject matter center, learning center, learner center, teacher dominated, it's the same like teacher center approach, or interactive. Interactive means teacher will play a role as a facilitator, as a teacher, but students are also, what we can say, students are also active. They are busy in their learning process, and they are doing some sort of activities by which language is learned, or by which some sort of other learning is involved, that is done by the mostly by the students. Or banking approach, What could be this banking approach? I think it must be the and come under the behavioristic approach or banking concept of education. The students are accustomed to learn the things in a cramming way or in a as a result of rote learning, but they are taught they have to shift on the paper or banking concept of education. It means rote learning or cramming. There is no creativity, there is no uniqueness by the learners, there is no novelty in thinking or in different other fields of learning. So it's a banking concept of learning or constructivist and disciplinal or integrated or individualistic or collaborative, indirect, guided or direct. There are these are the examples of the approaches. There are different approaches. So when what we can say teacher center approach, we call what we can say we talk about teacher center approach or learner center approach. So teacher center approach comes under the category of what we can say the behind approach of this teacher center approach, the behaviorism theory. It's a theoretical knowledge, theoretical base, but we can say that provides information, that provides a set of rules or concepts or set of beliefs about this, what we can say about this teacher center approach. So the background, what we can say the background which is provided in this approach is the behaviorism theory, so theoretical knowledge, whereas in learner center the what we can say the foundation is given by the humanism or humanistic theory. So move on towards language teaching methods. There are many language teaching methods throughout the world that are being used by the students, sorry, by the teacher to teach their learners and students. So some of them we will discuss today, and the rest of the teaching method we will discuss in our next lecture. So language teaching methods, GT method, that is very familiar with our educational system, especially in our government educational sector. Teachers are mostly applying or using this as the very one option, as a very one single option that's available for the teacher, and they are using this GG method. Then there is a direct method that is what we can say, although in our context, in our educational context, in our private sectors, some sort of efforts are being used to apply this direct methods. The audiolingual method, it's the focus is on the communication rather than structure or rather than what we can say translation or grammar or pronunciation. It's related to the communication, communicative purpose. And the last one is also related to the communicative language teaching. There must be communication or interactive language teaching. So GT method, translation method, grammar translation method. According to Karl Platz, GTM is the oldest teaching method in SLA, in second language acquisition. SLA is the oldest or very famous, and throughout the world, maybe it's a least tendency to use this GT method in the world, throughout the world by the teacher, but in our context, in our Pakistani context, is being used with you know, willingly or unwillingly by the teachers in our educational system. It's based on translation of passages from native language into target language. And the actual purpose of this grammar translation method is if they learn the translation method, then the, they are able to translate the passages into some other languages. They must know the techniques, they must know the basics, how to translate the passages or how to translate the language from one to another, or from the native to into a target language. Focus on grammar rules, etymology, meaning, and syntax or grammatical structure of the target language in a more linguistic than communicative way. Here is no way here is what we can say the focus is not on communication, the focus is on cramming the grammatical rules cramming or rote learning of the meanings of the words or grammatical structure is learned by the learner, the main focus of this GTM method. What are the main facets or characteristics of grammar translation methods? Fundamental purpose of learning a foreign language to be able to read literature written in it. First of all, the foremost, but we can say the foremost purpose of learning a foreign language, that the learner must be able to read the literature in the target language or whatever the language he or she is learning. Literary language is superior to spoken language. Literary, or what you can say, literature or reading is emphasized on speaking. Sorry, reading is emphasized on focus rather than speaking or spoken language. Important goal is for students to be able to translate each language into the other. So translate the language into target language, translate from native language to into target language. Communicative competency in the target language is not a goal of foreign language instructions. Then the primary skills to be developed are reading and writing, the basic. Reading and writing is focused, whereas speaking is not focused or not emphasized. So little attention is paid to speaking, listening, almost none to pronunciation. Pronunciation is not the part of this GT method. It's a teacher-centered approach. This method, what we can say, is devised by or is proposed by teacher-centered approach or teacher-centered approach devised this method of what we can say GT method. The teacher is solely the authority inside the classroom. And the students and learners have to sit passively, silently, or without any thinking. They just maintain the discipline of the class as we can see in our classroom, a classroom in a public sector. We can see the main focus of the teacher and administrator or a principal just maintain that discipline. So I want to ask a question. What is the usage of that discipline? If students are sitting dumb and silent without anything, without any creativity, without any novelty of thinking, what is the usage of that discipline? It's my question. Most of the time I ask from the teacher. So it's useless. It's a futile. Discipline must be maintained by the teacher inside the classroom, but not at the cost of the study, not at the cost of the reading or learning. If learning is affected, if learning is missing, everything is futile and everything is useless. So deductive application of an explicit grammar rule is a useful pedagogical technique. Deductive approach. Rules are given to the students, right? And students or learners need to cram those rules, to learn by heart those rules, and to use those rules by giving some examples. So it's a deductive approach. Some rules are given, some theoretical knowledge is given, some basic knowledge is given, foundational knowledge is given, and then students and learners need to do practice, right? This is the main facet. These are the main facets of the method. Next, there is a direct method. Francois going 1880s. This direct method was devised by the Francois Gong. Child learn his mother tongue naturally and without practice. It means child learns mother tongue directly without any formal classroom setting. An attempt to teach the language as one could in learning mother tongue is known as direct method. But we can say, according to the supporter of this method or technique, they say if a child learns his or her mother tongue without any formal education, without any formal instruction, so what we can say, the purpose of the teaching of language also must be in the same way. So it's called direct method. If we give instruction to the child, to the learner, in the target language without usage of the mother tongue, without interference of the mother tongue. So it's also called natural method because it's learned naturally like mother tongue or first language. It's very difficult to bring exact environments in which mother tongue or first language is acquired. So later the same method became popular called direct method. This method were against of the GT method because that in this method rules or regulations are not taught by the teacher. Just give the exposure, just give the direct exposure, natural exposure to teach the learners, or in this way that learner learn language spontaneously in a smooth way without interference of the mother tongue or without interference of L1. The extreme use of mother tongue affected the naturalness of language. They say the proponent, or what we can say supporter of this theory or this method, they say if a child or a learner uses mother tongue, it means there is what we can say he or she will not be able to use that for a target language in an effective way, in a natural way. So the student did not learn language but practice of acquiring mother tongue or first language. So if they are banned, they are strictly banned to use L1 or mother tongue, they will be able to use that target language very quickly, immediately, with quick and rapid progress. So in this manner, same environment is created to learn second or foreign language, but learning SL is not natural process. So they try to create an environment that seems nature like, or in which our child or learns first language or L1. But what we can say, second language is not a natural process. We have to pay attention. We have to pay effort. We have to be, but we have to give our attention fully to that language. It depends on the will of the learner to learn for its own development. So teaching of SL or foreign language by observing the principle of language acquisition is the direct method. Main facets of direct method. Vocabulary is emphasized over grammar as in GT method. Structure, syntax or syntactical structure, or translation, etymology, or translation. Right? Translation, etymology, and syntactic structure were emphasized. But here in this direct method, vocabulary is emphasized over grammar. Although work on all four skills occur from the start in grammatical structure also, but language is primarily speech. Spoken language is emphasized rather than other language skills of listening or reading or writing. Objects are presented in the immediate classrooms environment to help students understand the meaning. So objects, they are shown the objects. For example, they are giving, a teacher is delivering a lecture, what we can say about agriculture or any technological point of view, he is explaining the things. So he will show the objects, he will show the things to the learners. So direct watching and observing those things in the classroom, students are able to get what we can say in a rapid way. Students are able to get the meanings, or is able to get the use of that target language if they are shown the object or the direct things in the classroom. The native language should not be used in the classroom. Mother tongue is banned. The teacher should demonstrate, not explain or translate. Translation is banned. There is no explanation, just demonstration, just giving or using the body language or showing the picture, showing the objects of the to the learners. It is desirable that students make a direct association between the target language and meaning. This is the emphasize, this is the prioritize, that there must be association, there must be direct link between the things or between the meanings or the target language. Students should learn to think in the target language as soon as possible, right? Students should learn to think in that. It's what we can say. So they have to think, and they are what we can say that exposure is given, or what we can say the situation is imposed on the students to learn the language, to learn the target language. Vocabulary is acquired more naturally if students use it full sentences rather than memorizing word list as in GT method. Most of the students do. The main purpose of language learning is communication. Pronunciation should be worked on right from the beginning of language instruction. As speaking is prioritized, so pronunciation is also prioritized or is given much attention. Self-correction facilitates language learning. Students make mistakes. They try to make corrections, or sometimes correction is given by the teacher, sometimes correction is given by themselves, by the students themselves. Opportunities are provided to use language in real context. Students are encouraged to speak as much as possible. Teacher is speaking in the target language, students are speaking in the target language, and the purpose is to achieve what we can say here. The purpose is just communication. There must be communication. And there must be effort must be done to associate, to make linkage between the language or between the things or meanings. Grammar should be taught inductively, whereas in GT method we have discussed about the deductively, in a deductive manner. Where in GT method rules are given and then students are asked to do practice according to those rules. Grammatical rules are given in GT method. For example, they need to use in what way they have to learn a present perfect tense. What is present perfect tense? Definition is explained by the teacher. Then some examples are given by the teacher, and then learners are asked to do practice, more and more and more practice, according to the deductive method. Here, what we can say, grammar should be taught inductively. Here, teacher will not give them rules or structure. He will not talk about, he or she will not talk about the structure of the or the principles or the what we can say. Here, the just they are involved. Learners are involved to do practice or to do what we can say examples, and then after doing a lot of practice, teacher will say, yes, this is called present perfect tense. They are using present perfect tense in actual sense or in actual situation. Actual situation mean they are doing practice or they are doing practice of those examples of present perfect tense. The teacher in the start teacher will not tell them about the rules. This is called present perfect tense. They are doing practice of present perfect tense. They are using the third form of the verb and they are using the present perfect tense with helping verb of present perfect tense. Here, what we can say, then a teacher will generalize and he or she will say that these are the rules. These are the rules of present perfect tense. There may never be an explicit grammar rule given. Explicit means there is no clear-cut explanation of the grammatical rules in this math. Next, there is the audiolingual method. With the entry of the United States into World War II, we are talking in the context of Second World War. It had a significant effect on language teaching in America to supply the US government with personnel who were fluent in German, French, Italian, Chinese, Japanese, Malay, and other languages, and who could work as an interpreters and translators. So it was necessary to set up a special language training program in the Second World War in 1940s. The government commissioned American universities to develop foreign language programs for military personnel because they need to use that language on the border areas where they were fighting with other nations, or they need to cope with different languages. So that's the Army Specialized Training Program. It was established in 1942. 55 American universities were involved in their program by beginning of the 1943. Audiolinguistics demanded a complete reorientation of the foreign language curriculum. right? Like the 19th century reformers, they advocated a return to speech-based instruction with the primary objective of oral proficiency. Here is also what we can say a communication purposes. Our emphasize or prioritize the linguist or educationists prioritize the oral proficiency. That was the basic principle or basic objective, and dismiss the study of the grammar or literature as the goal of foreign language teaching. So they also emphasize like direct method. Here is also the emphasis was given on the spoken form of the language, spoken skill of the language. A radical transformation is called for. There was a demand to use, to shift all those phases and to change all those phases that were involved before this. And a new orientation of procedure is demanded, and a thorough house cleaning of methods, materials, texts, and tests is unavoidable. They must be changed, they must be shifted, or there must be what we can say a complete transformation of the things, of all these things. The audiolingual method, main phases of the audiolingual method was what was the focus, what was the emphasis, what was the prioritize in this language, in this language teaching method. Language forms do not occur by themselves, they occur most naturally within a context. So teacher introduces a new dialogue. The main focus on the dialogue between communication between two people, communication between group of people, as in the context of Second World War, the soldiers needed to communicate with other communities. So here the main purpose is to developing a dialogue, and why the dialogue approach, or what we can say introduction of a dialogue in this method, because the purpose is just communication. Smooth and thorough communication must be done between the people, between two people or more than two people. The native language and the target language have separate linguistic systems, so they must be kept apart, right? Native language and target language, there is a clash between the linguistic systems. For example, take the examples of our Urdu language or English language. Many things are different, and our learners our learners have to face, most of the time our learners has to face problems, because they think in the mother tongue, they think in the Urdu language, and the structure and what we can say typology of the language is different. So that's why they make mistake, and there is errors in their speaking, in their writing, or in their other language skills. So the native language and the target language have separate linguistic systems. Alphabets are separate, or what we can say the sound system is different or separate, and the meanings are also different. So there must be kept apart. There must not be allowed native language and one mother tongue must not be allowed to intermingle or to use by the second language learner. The language teacher uses only the target language in the classroom. Actions and pictures are used, like in direct method. Actions here, but we can say demonstration is also given by the teacher in the shape of actions, or pictures are also shown to the learners. One of the language teacher's major role is that of model of target language. A teacher is give a teacher is giving the role or model role of the target language, or maybe teacher is giving by himself or herself, or maybe teacher is providing some native examples or some native what we can say some videos of native speakers, or some audios of native speakers. So teachers should provide them with a good model by listening to how it is supposed to sound. Students should be able to mimic the model. Students need to, what we can say, imitate that models in audio form and video form. They are showing what they are showing, but the teacher, they have to listen, they have to observe them, observe the native speakers, or observe the teacher, or then they need to imitate those sounds, or imitate those language components that they are learning. Repetition and drilling are emphasized. Repetition and drilling. Where we have seen the repetition and drilling in which language teaching approach, what we can say, the behaviorism or behavioristic theories. We have discussed about this repetition and drilling, and GT method is also emphasized on repetition and drilling. So here in audiolingual method is also repetition and drilling are emphasized. It's important to prevent learners from making errors. Errors lead to the formation of bad habits. So errors are not allowed, or errors are discouraged by the teachers or by the expert trainer. The purpose of language learning is to learn how to use language to communicate. Teacher uses spoken cues and picture cues. Teacher conducts transformation and question and answer drillings. Students should overlearn, learning to answer automatically without stopping to think. So, but we can say it's related to fluency, it's related to accuracy, right? In a spoken form and the speaking skill. When they are given the exposure, they are given the natural exposure, or when they are indulged in natural environment and teacher is giving them a sample, a role, or then they need to do practice again and again. In this way, they learn accuracy and they learn fluency. They learn the language fluently. They speak the language fluently without any hesitation, without any, what we can say, without any reluctancy. New vocabulary is introduced through lines of dialogue. Vocabulary is limited. So you have repetition, or but we can say even learning the lines of the dialogue in the classroom is going on. Learners are supposed to learn structural patterns also. Students are not given grammar rules. Grammatical points are taught through examples and drillings. So inductive approach. Examples are given, but not the grammatical rules. Speech is more basic to language than the written form. One of the teacher's responsibilities is to present information about that culture, the particular culture. If they are learning English language, it's a teacher responsibility to provide them, to supply them some helping material, some authentic material related to that particular culture, related to that particular British culture or American culture or any other culture that is related to that particular target language. Number 4 is the communicative language teaching. Communicative language teaching. This was partly a response to the social criticism the prominent American linguist Noam Chomsky had leveled at a structural linguistic theory in his classic book Syntactic Structure. Noam Chomsky was criticized by his, what we can say, a structural linguistic theory, and he gave a response in the shape of what we can say the form of this communicative language teaching method approach. Chomsky had demonstrated that the current standard structural theories of language were incapable of accounting for the fundamental characteristics of language. What is that fundamental characteristic of language? It's a creativity and uniqueness of individual sentences. So a child learns a language. A child learns a language by his or her adults in the way that what we can say a particular set of words. He hears a particular phrases, a particular sentences, but he can create complex sentences by himself or herself. So, what we can say here, Chomsky emphasized that there are some sort of fundamental characteristics of language, and that is creativity and uniqueness of individual sentences. A child learns in his or her own way, and although mimic or imitation is also involved in this process. But because of this large language acquisition device, is able to generate more complex sentences. And this is the characteristic of a language, or what we can say, a learning a language visual sentence. British applied linguists emphasized another fundamental dimension of language that was inadequately addressed in current approaches to language teaching at that time, that they were not addressing to that language fundamental dimension. The functional and communicative potential of language. They saw the need to focus in language teaching on communicative proficiency rather than on mere mastery of structure. Scholars who advocated this view of language, such as Christopher Candling and Henry Widdowson, they are proponents or they are the supporter of this communicative language teaching method. And here, what we can say, the main thing, the main focus, the main emphasis is on communicative potential, as we have seen in the what we can see in audiolingual method. Wilkins' contribution was an analysis of the communicative meaning that a language learner needs to understand and express communicative meanings rather than describe the core of language through traditional concepts of grammar and vocabulary. Wilkins attempted to demonstrate a system of meanings that lay behind the communicative rules of language. Here, we can focus on communication plus meanings. What sort of meanings are interpreted by the speakers and listeners? He described two types of meanings: notional categories, in which what we can say concept related to time, sequence, quantity, location, frequency, and category of communicative function, right? Notional categories or communicative categories. In communicative categories, what we can say a request or denials or offers, complaints, etc. Wilkins later revised and expanded his 1972 documents into a book called Notional Syllabuses, which had a significant impact on the development of communicative language teaching. Here, what we will see main facets of audiolingual method. According to linguistics, being able to communicate requires more than linguistic competency, it requires communicative competency. So, what is we can say to learn a language, it must be the basic concept or basic competency or command over the language to learn a language, the basic rules, basic structure of the language, as well as it's also a prerequisite or it also a requirement, it also a demand that there must also be a communicative competency. A learner must communicate in a better way. A learner must communicate. There must not be a communication breakdown. There must not be a communication barrier. After learning the structure, after learning the basic structure, they must do practice and there must be a smooth communicative process between two interlocutors or between two what we can say people. Shifting the field from a linguistic structure center approach to communicative approach. So what was the shift? There was a shift from linguistic structure center approach to a communicative center approach, and it was about 1970s and early 80s. Widdowson 1990 has explained. Aims to apply the theoretical perspective of the communicative approach by making communicative competency the goal of language teaching and by acknowledging the interdependence of language and communication. What main thing is involved here? Whenever possible, authentic language. Which language? That is used in real context and in the form of handouts. Teacher gives the audience, the learners, the students handouts, or give some, what we can say here, if we see in this digital learning systems, we can see the Yeah, teacher can provide links for the audios and videos to observe them, to listen the hear the native speakers or native language. Because all writer's intention is part of being communicatively competent, right? Speakers or writer's intention is part of being communicatively competent. Competency is required. So learners are watching audios and video, hearing audios and watching videos or reading the handouts here, but we can say communicatively they must be competent by taking those authentic materials or by getting some knowledge or information by those materials. Target language is a vehicle for classroom communication, not just the object of study. So they do practice in actual sense of the target language for the purpose to communicate. Main focus on the process of communication rather than just mastery of language forms. So here in our context, in our Pakistani context, if what we can say, the learners are involved in direct method or are taught by the audiolingual method, we can say here our focus and purpose is to get mastery over the language. But the actual purpose or focus of this audiolingual method is to mastery of communication or command over communication, just getting the mastery of language forms, just getting the mastery of command over the language structure. They must be able to use that language, use those forms, use those language forms in actual sense, in communicative. Uh, they must show their communicative competency. Students should work with language at the discourse or suprasentential level, above the sentence, suprasentential level. Learners must learn about cohesion and coherence. These properties of language bind the sentences together. There must be coherence. It means when they have learned the language, they must use the language in a logical form, and that must be sensible. They must use the language in a sensible way rather than just speaking the words without any logical inferences or without any logical thinking. They must speak what we can say. Their speaking or their utterances must be sensible or must be what we can say authentic. So games are important to having certain features in common with real communicative events. Purpose is to exchange. Having students work in small groups maximizes the amount of communicative practice they receive. So students are indulged in some small groups and they do practice in small groups. In this way, when they do practice in when they do practice in a group activities, there is a what we can say the outcomes, they can get better outcomes. Errors are tolerated and seen as natural outcome of the development of communication skills. Here, errors are allowed, errors are tolerated, and errors or mistakes are corrected by the expert. Emphasize on fluency rather than accuracy. Speaker must be fluent rather than accurate speaking or rather than accurate conversation. There must be fluency. Fluently, without any hesitation, without any reluctancy, they must speak the target language. Teacher's major responsibility to establish situations like to promote communication, right? What is the teacher's major responsibility? To establish situation or to establish to give them exposure to to promote communication. They must encourage their learners to indulge so that the learner must indulge themselves in a communicative process and they do practice more and more and in the to get mastery over the communication and to get fluency over the communication of the target language. Learning to use language forms appropriately is an important part of communicative competency. So, how can we get competency? If we know the language, if we know the language forms, if we know the language structure, then after that, doing practice again and again, or to getting some, what we can say, native examples, or to watching some native speakers or listening to some native speakers, we can do practice again and again, and we can get mastery or competency over that particular language, target language. Teacher is a facilitator or advisor. He is not a competent, sorry, he is not what we can say, an authority that is not questionable, or what we can say is not wholly solely the controller of the class. He is a facilitator. He needs to facilitate the learners. He needs to create an environment in which they must be able to, his or her learners must be able to speak, or there is a, what we can say, they must be encouraged to speak or to use the target language rather than scolding all of the time, or giving them harsh remarks, or making corrections, or making the corrections of their mistakes. So, severe or severe harsh manners. So, your teacher is a facilitator or advisor. Grammar and vocabulary is learned by following the function, situational, context, and the roles of the language user. Situation is created, or actual context is created by the teacher to make them aware, so that the learners can get practice easily of that language. They can use that particular context to learn the target language.